Video games are great at teaching life lessons. Xenoblade 2 taught me not to get so caught up in goals that I forget about the people around me. Greece taught me that depression is conquerable. And Life is Strange taught me to never, under any circumstances, trust any of my teachers. Life is Strange is such a bizarre and unique game that sometimes it feels more like a playable movie rather than a game. And I don't mean this as an insult, it's just part of Life is Strange's identity. Rather than focusing on deep gameplay mechanics or sequences, both of which it has, it focuses primarily on immersing you into Max Caulfield and her world that seems to be falling apart. It focuses on giving us relatable and sincere characters, and it does so remarkably well, which makes the game feel high stakes, personal, and epic. I love Life is Strange. It delivered a story that I will never forget, with characters that are so endearing that it's hard to let go. However, despite this praise, I find it hard to call the game itself great. I know this may seem oddly conflicting, maybe even contradictory, but it's still a game well worth experiencing. Life is Strange is presented in a series of 5 episodes that came out over the course of just under a year, and while this episodic format, on a surface level, works for the game, it leads to one of the game's biggest problems, that being consistency. At the time, Don't Nod was a fairly small development company, and they were taking on a very ambitious project with Life is Strange. In order to fund this, an episodic format not only made sense, but was almost necessary. By releasing each episode one at a time, they could use their earnings from each episode to fund the next, making it a much smaller financial risk, and a much more obtainable project. They didn't have to fund the entire thing all at once, they got to fund it one episode at a time. But this episodic format meant that each episode could face changes during development that may have strayed from the original vision, which can happen for a few reasons, whether that be a lukewarm reception to a certain idea, or something that's not working quite as well as they expected in practice. There isn't room for drastic changes, but there's room to make some small little fixes as needed. While this freedom is nice in some aspects, it can lead its way to issues with coherence. Changes made in later episodes do not affect previous ones, so the writing may build up to something only to be scrapped or changed. We can see this in Life is Strange with the Rachel Amber storyline. In the first episode, her name and face are plastered all over every wall and make up many of the conversations. She's mysterious, yet the center of attention. Yet, in later episodes, she seems to become much less of the focus and is left to just a few spare lines in each episode. This is because Rachel Amber originally played a much larger part in the story, but her role was diminished during development after the first episode. So the character that they spent so much time building up is suddenly much less significant. But despite these changes, the writing team on Life is Strange is incredibly talented and managed to make the story flow well and remain engaging. It's a testament to their talent that this is the only glaring issue when there were certainly many more changes made. Each character oozes with unique personality and charm. Every situation is evocative, from the suspenseful moments to the heartfelt ones. These characters are so vibrant and their relationship is so genuine, and the entire experience feels purposeful and poetic. I want to make it abundantly clear that the writing team on Life is Strange is phenomenal, forming a story that is exciting and genuine. However, I believe the episodic format, which allowed the story to be malleable throughout development, also hindered the writers in another way. Each episode tells a story that grows over the course of the episode, building up to each individual conclusion. This means that every episode ends with many things coming together in an epic way, leading to a surprising and exciting ending. These endings often made for great cliffhangers, but at the cost of the next episode having to provide the falling action to the previous story of the previous episode before continuing this overarching story over the 5 episodes. Because of this, episodes 2 through 5 felt like they had this weird empty space and awkward pacing before finding its footing and continuing. This effect only happens because of the episodic nature of the game. Though it's minimalized through good writing and an overarching story, it is still, nonetheless, present. Through this constraint, the writers were still able to tell a wonderful and endearing story. At the heart of the story are Max and Chloe. The relationship between the two is special, yet it's something that's still believable. Their interactions feel human and intimate, and this drives both of the characters and their motivations. While Max isn't a stereotypically good character, she strives to do what's best for those around her, especially her friends. And Chloe is a character driven by anger for the tragedies of her past. She's been abandoned by so many people, leaving her alone. So when the two reunite, there's a mix of anger and resentment, but it can't hide the joy both of them ultimately feel. Both of these characters have problems they have to deal with, together. And these problems ground the characters into a relationship that feels real. And grounding these characters is an impressive and important feat because, oh yeah, Max has supernatural powers. At the beginning of the game, Max discovers her powers to rewind time, which she uses to save Chloe. This power plays an integral part in the story and the storm that is coming for Arcadia Bay, but also plays a significant part in the gameplay. Compared to the story, the gameplay can feel fairly simple. There are some basic puzzles that often use your rewind power, but the rest of the game is limited to walking around, looking at things, and on occasion grabbing things sometimes. This sounds boring, and while it's certainly not deep, it's still effective. The gameplay is what brings you into the life of the character and further strengthens the suspense of their situations and strengthens the relationship between Max and Chloe. You become a part of their world. It isn't complicated or deep, but it's intentional. It's intimate. As I said before, Life is Strange is a unique game, as gameplay isn't limited to traditional segments. Rather, your control of Max and engagement in the situation applies both in walking and gathering and in conversation. The people you talk to and the things you say affect the characters and the world. To my surprise, the ending of the game is only affected by your final decision, but the decisions you make along the way still have consequences throughout the game and affect the characters. For example, if you decide to be nice to Victoria, your relationship will end on a much different note. It's these sorts of smaller things that are affected. While it may sound less exciting when decisions don't affect the ending of the game, it feels more sincere that they only affect these smaller things in these relationships, which also seems more true to the way the world works as a whole. If you make a decision that hurts someone, it isn't going to change the end of the game, but you have to finish knowing that that relationship is fractured and there's animosity between the two characters. But these decisions bring up an interesting debate, one I discussed in my video on characters. When we have characters that are set figures in the world, but then we have dialogue options left to us, how does that affect the character? In this case, the dialogue options would all need to be rooted in something the character would actually say. In Life is Strange, you don't get to decide if Max is good or bad, but you do get to decide if Max makes good or bad decisions. Oftentimes the decisions you have to make are between two complete opposites, but these options work in Life is Strange because both are rooted in decisions Max would make, even when the decisions are opposing, because at the end of the day, they're just that, decisions. You are deciding what is best for you, the characters, and the world, but you are not deciding who you are. Gameplay and storytelling are two things that should work in tandem in order to create an engaging experience. While Life is Strange has issues when it comes to pacing and coherence, the gameplay is effective in setting up situations that tie into the story while instilling emotion into the player. It's a game that sets out to impact you and put you in suspenseful situations with characters that you love. And on this front, Life is Strange is a massive success, and it's this success that makes Life is Strange so special and so loved. Life is Strange is not a typical game, not by any means. It was made by a team that accepted constraint in order to deliver a game with a story and characters that they cared about. The game is made with passion and heart and intentionality, which oozes into the characters, making for characters that are infinitely memorable. It's a story well told, and one certainly worth experiencing.